Hello and welcome. Today we are talking about preparing our lean teams for the AI mandate. One of the things that we're seeing here is that regardless of company size, everyone is grappling with how to incorporate AI into their organizations. So today we're going to talk about some of the tools and capabilities that we have at Google Cloud to help you navigate that world, and we hope that it will be helpful to you. Today, I am joined by my friend and colleague, Bobby Allen. Bobby, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do here at Google Cloud?
Yvonne, first, thanks for having me. I'm technically a product manager, even though if you look me up on LinkedIn, I call myself a cloud therapist. And that's because sometimes as we break things in technology, we need to lay on the couch and cry and have a little bit of counseling. How does AI make you feel, right? We need to have those conversations as we talk about how to move forward. But happy to be here. I'm a product manager for our containerized products. So GK and Cloud Run are technically what I'm responsible for.
And I'm Yvonne Sharp. I lead our North American platform engineering team focused on infrastructure. So we're gonna talk a lot about Google Cloud infrastructure today, about AI readiness, and about how to think about the coming changes in our industry as it relates to AI and all of our other workloads. So let's talk a little bit about why we're here today. We're really here because organizations are struggling to understand how to approach what's perceived as an AI mandate. Their organizations know that they need to embrace AI. They have an existing reality of infrastructure, of solutions, of software, of tools that they're running today. And they know that they need to make some changes, but they're not sure exactly how to do that, how to be ready for that, or how to prepare their IT organizations to meet this readiness gap. And this is especially challenging in organizations with lean teams and limited resources who are already time constrained and how they're dealing with their IT environment today. But one of the things that we do know is that organizations understand that they have inadequate infrastructure and capabilities to meet the AI mandate that they're seeing. They're either trying to implement AI projects and they're failing because they don't have everything that they need to be able to do that, or they're struggling to get started. And so we see this need for customers to embrace AI and to make changes in how they're deploying infrastructure, how they're deploying applications, and how they're thinking about their environments. And this is not just about technology, but it's about their skill set, the tools that they're using, and about being ready to move forward into this new world. So what we're seeing is customers, they not only have legacy systems where their data is residing, but they also have organizational silos. And for a long time, the industry has thought about our infrastructure in a very particular way. And what we're seeing is that not only is AI altering how we need to think about that infrastructure, but also we need new tools and new capabilities, whether it's additional hardware capabilities and with GPUs and TPUs, or that their data isn't really ready for an AI world. And so we see, only 10% of organizations feel like they can fully capture the value of what's in their environment and be ready to move forward. Now, one of the things that we're also seeing is that organizations are facing some common challenges, and these can even be exacerbated in our small organizations. There's analysis paralysis. In other words, how do we even figure out where to start? What needs to change? What systems do we have? What projects do we want to prioritize? And how do we think about that moving forward? How do we enable our teams? We have skill gaps. Are there new tools that we need? New capabilities? How do we get ready? How do we prepare an environment? There are licensing changes going on with vendors that we've worked with in the past. How do we understand how to embrace that and how to work through that in the future? We have technical anchors in our environment, systems that have either been there for a long time, that have run and have suited our needs that we still need, but we don't know how to enable them to be ready in an AI world. We have dependencies on applications, or we don't know what our application dependencies are. From time to time, customers will experience an outage and they realize that systems are impacted they didn't know would be. And so how do we understand how those applications are dependent on one another? What's security look like in this new world? How do we secure it? How do we provide the level of resilience and scalability that we need? How do we start relatively small and grow as our business grows? Maybe we don't have the resources to deploy large infrastructures initially. So how do we start in a way that's going to allow us to not only innovate, but scale as we go? How do we think about capacity and cost? And we still have our day jobs. We're still concerned with keeping the lights on, keeping systems running as we continue to innovate.
Yvonne, I'd love to jump in there because
Sure.
all of these things are spot on. And some of the things that I hear as I go around and talk to customers are, you know how we talk about people, process, technology a lot? I love that, but I don't like that. I actually really like people, process, problem. Because I think in being overwhelmed, and I hope the audience isn't offended when I say that I work at Google and I'm overwhelmed by a lot of this stuff. This is my day job and I can't keep up with it. But I think people, process, problem keeps us focused on who are we trying to make something better for? Because all of these different challenges can make us focus on the tech to the detriment of the people and the customers. And I think if we see someone's face and we think about that persona of who we're trying to make things better for, I think it keeps us focused so the technology doesn't become the only thing that we're serving. That's the first one. The second one is my personal mantra is that technology is the easy part of tech. The longer version is tech is the easy part, people are the best part, behavior is the hard part, humility is the worst part. And so you talked about this as you went over some of the challenges. It's like the tech is the part above the iceberg and all those other things are like what's below the waterline. So we have to think about cultural change. We have to think about the organization. We have to think about the people that are scared. You know, we talked about skills gaps. The people feel like their jobs are going away as they're trying to learn these new things. So all of this creates the beautiful chaos that I think you're setting us up to try to give some clarity to in the rest of this session.
And what all of this means is that we have all of these common challenges that we face. And at the same time, we know that change is necessary. We know that we need to be ready for an AI world. We need to be prepared to meet the challenge. And as we've seen, the industry is moving so quickly. We don't always know today what we're going to need 12 months from now. So what we want to provide you today are some keys or things to think about and focus on that we know will be meaningful and beneficial to you and your organization, regardless of what the next new AI capability is going to be. So the first few things that we want to hit on are what do we even mean when we talk about AI readiness? First, you have to think about APIs throughout your organization. If you have a service, that service needs to be accessible via API. There is no way for an AI agent or an AI tool to interact with that service if it doesn't have an API. So think about, as you're not only building your applications, but you're deploying your infrastructure, how you're going to interact with that via an API. Also, are you deploying with code? Do you have do you have the ability to iterate quickly and deploy your infrastructure as code so that you're not creating artisanally crafted services that need human interaction to keep them working? One of the best ways to do that is to use infrastructure as code, where your code then becomes your system of record for what your current deployed state is. And that code is going to allow you to make changes and iterate more quickly. Regardless of the size of your organization, compliance is always a challenge. So what are your compliance requirements? What are your auditing and logging requirements? And how do you build those into your infrastructure? As opposed to having a separate process or system that manages compliance for you, are there things you can do to build that into your infrastructure that are going to increase your velocity? And you see our last item there is increased velocity, because ultimately, as technology moves more quickly and as AI advances and innovates, we're going to need to be able to move with it. We can't do that if we don't increase the velocity of our systems. We talked a lot about velocity from a software development standpoint. But I would argue we also need to think about that from an infrastructure and a deployment standpoint. How do we deploy quickly? How do we do it reliably and consistently? And how do we do that with the ability to roll back in ways that allow us to move more quickly?
These are so well said, Yvonne. I think like you're setting us up to be able to innovate, but then have the breadcrumbs to get back to things that may have been great. Because if we have this eureka moment and do something cool and then can't replicate it, then it was art, not science. And so I love these keys to help us turn a lot of that innovation and those eureka moments into things that can be repeatable events and that we can spread throughout and scale our organization and our customers.
And before we get overwhelmed, Bobby already mentioned how it's a struggle for us as Googlers to keep up with the rapid pace of innovation going on in our world. I want to share Gall's law with you, which says a complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. So as you're thinking about how to approach this new problem and challenge, think about what's the simplest way to begin to deploy or to build a system that's going to work, is going to let us experiment that we can grow with. You don't have to start with a huge complex system. It's best to break this down into manageable chunks, start with a simple system, and innovate from there. And I'm really excited. Bobby's got some demos that he's going to show us a little later that are going to give you some breadcrumbs for great ways to start and some simple examples that will get you started on this journey. As we think about AI and demand for new infrastructure, there are many things that we need. If we're training our own models, we need the ability to do that at scale. We need to think about cost and efficiency, and we need to think about how we're going to onboard, be secure and reliable, and how do we get capacity where we need it. We have tons of tools at Google to allow you to do that. And one of the great things about Google Cloud is that we provide a range of solutions that are going to meet you where you are. So we have everything from bare metal offerings all the way through to serverless solutions. So if you have a VMware environment that you need to lift and shift and you need to migrate that to a cloud, you either have a data center that you need to exit or you want to streamline and optimize that environment, we have our GCVE option. In addition to that, if you need to run some VMs for legacy apps that need to run on an OS, you can deploy there. And then we have our modern cloud native infrastructure, Google Kubernetes Engine, which Bobby is going to dive into, App Engine, Cloud Run, and Cloud Functions. So we have an entire continuum of solutions that are going to provide you the foundation that you need to be able to innovate regardless of where you are in your modernization journey. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Bobby to get started.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. There's so much good ground you covered in terms of setting us up for success. So I'm going to dive into our two main container products, Cloud Run and GKE. And so for our listeners who may not understand which one to use when, the simple answer is start with Cloud Run, unless you have a reason to need the Kubernetes API, and know that this is a two-way door decision. You can easily start with one and move to the other. And even with the last slide, when Yvonne talked about all the different compute options, if you're on bare metal, GCVE or GCE, for example, we even have tooling to help you get to our containerized runtime. So if you're starting kind of with the greenfield, start with these products. If you're starting from some brownfield legacy things, we can get you here. But these are the things that we're going to kind of focus on today, in particular Cloud Run, which I think is specifically relevant for this audience. So what does that look like? So how does all this fit together, first of all? So the run pieces is a portion of what Yvonne talked about. That's where the code runs. But there are a whole bunch of other products around us in the Google ecosystem, whether it's Firebase because you want to do mobile development, whether they're tools related to code assistance like Code Assist for how you're building and doing development, whether it's things like migrate to containers that can help you move from VMs to containers. All of these different pieces fit together, but we're zeroing in on the run times, GKE and Cloud Run particularly in this piece, because that's where your code runs. Now, Google has also made great progress, not just in our own eyes, but even in the eyes of major analysts like Gartner. So this animated slide shows the progress that Google has made over the past several years in this particular Magic Quadrant around strategic cloud platform services. And so we've never stopped innovating. We're not resting on our laurels, and we want to keep putting the best products out there to serve you as you serve your customers. Now, we also drink our own champagne. And so we use Google products to power a lot of the things at Google that you may know. So on the left-hand side, when it comes to GKE, you may have used things like Fitbit before, or Nest. You may have heard of things like DeepMind or Waze. You may have played around with things like Vertex AI. They run on Google Kubernetes Engine. If you've played around with Firebase or the Vertex AI agent engine, those run on Cloud Run. And so we are our own first customer inside of Alphabet. We're using our products to power our own innovation, much of which also touches you all as you're serving your customers. Now, I want to give you two practical ways to get started. So if we're sitting in your shoes and we want to know how to create something cool, to experiment, or to do something for your customers, there are a couple ways we could do this. So one, there's this phenomenon that is kind of sweeping the globe right now called vibe coding. And that is, as opposed to starting with traditional code in an IDE, you can start with a prompt or an idea, but oftentimes that vibe coding application is trapped inside your browser. Well, we have a pattern where you can start with Google AI Studio or Firebase Studio, create something very cool, prototype rapidly, push that out to Cloud Run, and then Cloud Run can talk to Gemini or Vertex by way of API. And so you've got something that you can send to tons of other people. So that means you can create something cool, it can go viral, and you can have a scalable way to support hundreds, if not thousands of people that want to access the cool application. And we may even be able to show you a little bit of that today. The second pattern is if you have code that you want to consider deploying to a container, you can actually do that. We have something called source to deploy. So if you have a GitHub repo or code repository, even if you're not an expert in Docker, you can actually leverage some of the features in Cloud Run called build packs to turn that into a container, run that in our serverless infrastructure. And the dotted line is there because, again, you can move easily between Cloud Run and GKE. Very practical ways to get started. You don't have to learn the entire stack, but if I were getting started in your shoes, these are the two ways that I would look at doing that. So let's start to get into demo time, but let me set this up. One of the big things that we're looking at now, generative AI is really a lot of what's kind of triggered the mandate for us to really get in the game when it comes to AI. So one of the things that we see is image generation. And so we want to pass in text descriptions, for example, of things that we want. And then we have these large language models that can turn those into pictures like Miss Pac-Man sitting there sipping on iced tea with sunglasses on. We also have cases where we want to scale things up, where we have multiple people that may access cool things that we create. And then we also have the vibe coding piece that we talked about. And again, I want to show you a few of those things. So let's step out of the slides for a second. And I want to pull up my pixel generator. And so I want to show you kind of what we were talking about before. So if I wanted to create a picture similar to what you saw in the presentation, I can pop in a description like this, where I say, I want to create a picture of Miss Pac-Man wearing sunglasses, sitting in a chair and sipping a glass of iced tea. And so this is taking my text, it's passing it to a large language model, and it's going to turn this into kind of a pixelated image. And so this is where you can be creative and start to just play around with what it looks like. So this picture is a little bit different than the other one because, again, sometimes our generative AI models do things a little differently. And this is cool because you can play around with things like show Michael Jordan, the famous basketball player, wearing a Captain America uniform. So what does that look like? Again, pixelated art, just playing around, and you'll see where I'm going with this to kind of build into something that you might even want to leverage in your businesses. Now, again, it's taking some creative license. And so this is Michael Jordan wearing a Captain America outfit. I think those might be Air Jordans. I'm not positive, but close enough, right? And so this is one form of image generation. I'm going to switch to another one because I want to show you how this can scale. So there's a different model called Stable Diffusion, where we can show something like a dragon wearing sunglasses. And so this is kind of a little bit more artistic version of image generation. And so it takes that prompt again, will produce an image, and you'll see that show up in the gallery. But what starts to be a little bit different about this is, what if you have a lot of people that want to hit this at once? So I've got a load generator here, assuming that maybe I have, say, 25 clients that want to do this. And so Cloud Run starts to crank up now. So this is our serverless, pay by the second serverless infrastructure that can load a model like Stable Diffusion and start to generate these images. So what you're going to see is this image gallery is going to start to populate very quickly, because Cloud Run is ramping up. As you see the number of clients supported, it's ramping up the GPU instances. These are the specialized hardware that help us run these large language models, and it's going to scale up in roughly 60 seconds or so. And then when I'm done, I can hit stop and it'll scale all the way back down to 0. Now, why is this important for you? One, if you create something that's really cool and goes viral, there was actually a fellow person at Google who created something really, really cool. Thousands of people hit it. And I think the grand total for that bill for a month's worth of usage was about $7.50, roughly the cost of a cup of coffee, because again, it's super efficient. It's very tight, charged by the second. And when we don't use things, like when there's no demand, it scales all the way down to 0, and you literally have no bill at all. One last thing I'll show you, and then I'm going to hand it back to Yvonne. Now, back to the vibe coding thing. If we have an idea that we want to build, and you'll see that this will continue ramping down in the background, it's going to go down to 0 in a few more seconds. And so in a minute and a half, it's ramped up, it's ramped down, and then we're all set. But what if I want to build something? I can go into Google AI Studio and pass in a prompt like this. I want to create a trivia game that's a mix of the Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, and Marvel Cinematic Universes. And I want to be able to expose questions to people where they can select the degree of difficulty and the number of questions. And so I can pass this in, and Gemini will turn this into an application. So it's going to take my prompt. You'll see it start to think. You'll see it start to create code. It's going to pop up an interface in the preview. This is going to take roughly 2 to 5 minutes to create a full-blown application. I'll spare you that. But I'll show you kind of what gets created from this and deployed to something like a Cloud Run. And it looks something like this. I call this Trivia Master. So I can choose the universe of questions I want to pick from. I'll do the Marvel Cinematic Universe this time. I'll go with hard questions, and we'll pick 5. And I get questions that look like this. So it's generating fresh questions every single time. And so this is one example of how you can vibe code, deploy things to Cloud Run, have a scalable endpoint that you can expose to your customers, pay by the second, and have a very efficient use of your resources. This is the type of infrastructure paradigm that Yvonne talked about, to make sure that we're using your resources wisely. So just to recap, all the image generation stuff, the vibe coding, the trivia game was all created using a product called Cloud Run. And this is great because even if you don't have a platform team, you have developers or builders who want to do cool stuff. Cloud Run does all the things that you need: per second billing, GPU access, high availability around the world. It does everything you need to produce really cool things internally and for your customers. It also supports agents. We're not talking about agents today, but just know that Cloud Run is already ready and purpose built for you to be able to build and deploy agents that'll fuel a lot of the agentic wave that you're hearing about right now in tech. And then if you're new to Google Cloud, it's okay. If you've never touched Google Cloud whatsoever, we have a couple things for you that may be helpful. One, we have an essential Google Cloud CLI tool, CLIs and command line interface tools, to get you familiar with how to talk to Google Cloud using that command line interface. Free course, you get a completion badge when you're done. And these are like manageable chunks of video that you can take in typically 10 to 15 minutes. Second, we have a generative AI certification. I've actually gone through this and found it very helpful. I think you will too. The training is free, and I believe the exam is $100, well worth your time. And then finally, Cloud Run, that same product we talked about, probably has the most generous free tier in all of the cloud. And you're reading that right in the bottom right-hand screen. 2 million requests per month, and that resets every single month. So build stuff, experiment, don't worry about your credit card getting eaten alive, and know that we're very generous because we want you building and creating new things. All right, we're gonna hand it back to Yvonne now.
Thanks, Bobby. And as you guys consider the examples that he provided in the demo, also think about what that could mean for your business. How often do you think it would be nice if we had a tool that could? Or we have often been constrained, especially in the small and medium business space, to the tools that were made available to us by third-party vendors. Now you can create tools that do exactly what you need them to deploy them on infrastructure that, like Bobby said, scales to zero. That's going to give you the ability to get creative in your tooling, both inside and outside of your organization, for you and your customers. So, but before we wrap up, I just want to talk a little bit about some actionable steps, some things that we can think about as we're working to achieve AI readiness for our organization. First, where is your infrastructure? Where is it running? And do you have access to all of the powerful compute resources that you need to be able to deploy? So what about GPUs or TPUs, other custom hardware? Do you have the ability to deploy that in a way that's going to be rapid enough and it's going to give you access when you need it? What's your data foundation look like? Do you have data in disparate silos across lots of different environments? Do you have a tool that's going to enable you to understand that data and fuel your AI ambitions? People and processes, we've talked about that a little bit, and also problems. We usually have plenty of problems, but are you working to enable your people to give them access to these tools, or are you taking a defensive approach to AI where you're restricting your folks' access to be able to use those tools and bring them into your environment? Allow people to be creative, give them the tools to explore and to make changes in your world and environment. But also, are you doing that in a way where you have governance and trust? Are you deploying securely? And do you have the tools that you need to be able to move forward? So what are our key takeaways for this conversation? First, the AI mandate is here. We are going to have to understand what AI means for our organization, how to incorporate that into what we have today, and then also think about what we're going to need to be able to do tomorrow. We need to be prepared and think about how we in our organizations can be ready to deploy AI in ways that not only meet our compliance requirements, but also help us get ahead in our organizations. Do we have the infrastructure that we need to be able to deploy? Are we ready? And then what are we looking for in our cloud providers to help us meet that need? Google has a range of services and capabilities, and we really are a leader in not just the AI space, but also the infrastructure space to give you all the tools that you need to be able to deploy effectively and meet your AI ambitions. And also, if you want to unlock all of the potential of generative AI, readiness is the first step. Before we close, we have a few tools that are available to you. So we have our 2025 State of AI Infrastructure Report. You can scan that QR code, download it, check that out. It will help you understand what's going on in the world of AI, especially AI infrastructure. We have a readiness assessment to help you understand where you are from an AI readiness perspective. And that's a tool that can be helpful for you as you're planning for the future. Also, if you have workloads that you're interested in migrating, that you want to bring those closer to the tools that you need to access from an AI perspective, we have our migration and assessment tool that you can scan there. So before we wrap up, Bobby, do you have any closing thoughts?
I just want to say thank you, Yvonne. I think if I were listening, I'd find it super helpful because you've given us practical tips to maximize innovation and minimize unintended consequences. We all want to kind of move forward and do things cool, but we want to do it in such a way that we don't have a bunch of technical debt. So thank you for being super practical and hopefully giving the audience things that are very useful.
Yes, thank you for joining me today, Bobby. And we hope that you all find these resources useful. We look forward to our next time together.